So this week for Juniper Ridge, this is the last section that we'll be looking at for Juniper Ridge. Starting on page 135, we have advice on attaining enlightenment at the moment of death. And so he refers here to the king, but doesn't specify which king this is. My guess would be Trisong Detsen, but I don't know for sure. And he asked, I am the king of little faith, but of great wealth and fame, and I am surrounded by ministers who are opposed and hostile to the Dharma. I am not a good person, but rather evil. I am fond of diversions and enjoyments and not spiritual in the least. I am only keen of things of this life and do not even fear for the prospect of going into the lower realms in the next life. Please take pity on me. I beg you to bestow upon me an instruction for attaining enlightenment at the time of death. So poor me. Help me out here, please. And so he bowed to the master and he bestowed the following. Imaho, I have an instruction for the short path of secret mantra by which even a great sinner, and that's not a word that we often use in Buddhism because we don't really think of things as sin the way we do in other traditions. Anyway, a great sinner can attain enlightenment before others. It is an instruction for avoiding the bardo. So listen here, Your Majesty. We will die. The mind travels in the force of karma and will assume another body. There are three ways to die: superior, middling, and inferior. To die like a king will attach, when someone dies like you dies, still attached to his domain and possessions, the inferior way to die is the inferior way to die. At the moment of death, be free from attachment. To die like a beggar, without the slightest attachment, that is the middling way to die. To die in solitude, free of even the notion of attachment or clinging, is the foremost way to die. So without any attachment or clinging to anything. So at the time of death, there are three ways to attain enlightenment. The person of lesser capacity has gathered merit and wisdom and attains enlightenment in the following life. The person of medium capacity has become familiar with the training and attains enlightenment in the bardo. The person of foremost capacity has gained realization and awakens to enlightenment without going through the bardo. So this specific instruction is for attaining enlightenment without going through the bardo. It is the short path of secret mantra. I will teach you this root instruction with 3 points. So resolve the root of the identity of all outer perceived objects to be the identity of space. Resolve the root of the identity of inner perceiver to be the identity of empty and cognizant mind. Resolve the root of phenomena by realizing that ignorance never arose. Thus, you will be free from the root of good and evil. And so the master then goes on and says that outer perceived objects refer to present appearances. They belong to mistaken perceptions of unrealized beings. Take, for example, water. Gods see it as nectar, demigods as weaponry, humans as water, animals as drink, hungry ghosts as rotten pus and blood, and hell beings as boiling liquid copper. So it depends on our approach. Our view of things changes dramatically. On down on the page, this is on page 138, about the middle of the page. As for these present appearances, do not assert them to be anything at all. Do not deny that what appears, and do not assert them to be or not to be. Their appearance is a natural appearance, and their emptiness is a natural emptiness. Let their identity be naturally empty, and let their appearance be devoid of a self-nature. So if we're able to just let go of labeling and evaluating and so forth, and just let them be as they are, what they are. You know, a rose is a rose by any other name, or no name at all. It's still a rose. Okay? And so then on page 139, he goes on And it talks about the root of the inner perceiving mind is empty cognizance, free from the root of rebirth. What is inner perceiving mind? It includes the mind within. The perceiver is the mind endowed with emotions. This mind cannot be proven to be anything whatsoever, nor is it complete nothingness. When this is realized, it is unconfined cognizance, known as realizing mind essence. Though cognizant, it is a cognizance that is unconfined. Through perceiving, it is an emptiness that cannot be proved to be anything whatsoever. So it transcends those kinds of notions. It's very easy to just put labels on things, to think about them, and so forth. We want to transcend that and just see things as they are without doing that. So then the king asks about the non-arising of ignorance, and that is to know that mind essence cannot be proved to have any identity whatsoever, and is totally free of constructed attributes, called knowing arising as knowledge. Also, recognizing oneself by oneself. Also, realizing the truth of non-arising. It is your true essence. Thus, you are free from the karmic phenomena of good and evil. You are free of hoping for the result of Buddhahood, free from fear of the lower realms and the hells. There is neither karma nor the ripening of karma. So we're transcending all of these things. That's why we often refer to it as a transcendent wisdom. It's a lot like in the Heart Sutra, where you say it's not this, not that, because those are all concepts and labels in the way that it refers to it there. So we transcend all of that. When you recognize that everything is your mind's delusion, you have resolved the nature of things and are free from the root of good and evil. The king asked, how do I awaken to enlightenment at the time of death without going through the bardo? And he replied, the yogi of highest mental acumen does not apprehend outer perceived objects. Therefore, he cuts through misconceptions about appearances, and letting appearances dissolve in themselves, he experiences no perceived objects in the bardo. Thus, the outer vessel-like world does not arise. So in the bardo, there's really not, it's all your mind, so there's nothing left to perceive. It's not, you've transcended thinking of things with the mind, so there's nothing there to perceive as a bardo at all. Samsara dissolves in itself, having no mental body in the bardo. When this yogi leaves the body, he meets with the space of awareness. The propelling force of good and evil actions is exhausted. So the king asked, how does the fruition of the three kayas manifest for such a yogi? And he replied, since the ground of Dharmata lies beyond the domain of words and descriptions, the space-life continuity that is no thing whatsoever is named the fruition of Dharmakaya. Cloud-light Sambhogakayas appear adorned with the major and minor marks within the experience of Bodhisattvas on the 10 levels. Nirmanakayas benefit whoever needs to be inspired in whichever way is necessary by means of boundless emanations. So that is the essence of that chapter. So we move on then to, he continues by talking and about the 5 bardos. This is a little bit different than in Natural Liberation, for example, where he talks about 6 bardos. So he's divided things up here a little bit differently. And so Lady Togal in this one is asking him, how many kinds of bardo states are there? And so he gives her this instruction about 5 bardo states. There's the bardo of this life, the bardo of samadhi, the bardo of dreaming, the bardo of birth and death, and the bardo of becoming. So in the 6 bardos, it's a little bit different than that. We still have the bardo of this life. We have the bardo of meditation, which would probably be the bardo of samadhi here, with the bardo of dreaming. Those would be the bardos, all 3 of those related to this life. And then there's the bardo of dying. Here he's got birth and death linked together as one. and then the bardo of becoming. He doesn't mention specifically the bardo of dharmata in this list. So it's a little bit different, but there's probably some overlap here among these categories. So then Lady Togal asks Padmasambhava, during the bardo of this life, how does one attain certainty in recognizing the ultimate sphere? Like a child reuniting with his mother. And he replied, recognize your own nature to be Dharmakaya. Now this reference to the child uniting with the mother is, of course, the experience of the clear light at the bardo of dying and death. So there is a connection here. So recognize your own nature to be Dharmakaya. There are three means for doing this. First, establish Dharmakaya as the natural state. Second, establish wakefulness as the manifest state. Third, establish original wakefulness as their non-duality. So then he goes on to explain these a little more. First, the Dharmakaya has 7 qualities. It is not produced by causes. It does not perish. It is self-existing. It is not created. It is insubstantial. It is not a temporal occurrence. It is beyond permanence and nothingness. Secondly, wakefulness is the manifest state, the external manifestations of delusion and the inner manifestations of wakefulness. How do external manifestations and delusions arise? Well, the unfabricated natural state is like the sky. Clouds of craving and grasping arise due to ignorance. Owing to this incidence, one encounter enters the womb and incarnates in the body of aggregates. Hence, the 5 elements appear, and from that, the 5 poisonous emotions. From these, the 5 types of illness cause one to die, and one circles through the 6 classes of beings. So he's describing this process by which we go from the true nature and understanding those things, and if we allow that to change and we become fixated on the idea of a self and attachment and aversion and so on and so on and so on, that's how we get ourselves into the cycle of samsara. How do the inner manifestations of wakefulness appear? They appear as self-liberated, insubstantial, and free from clinging. Ignorance dawns as awareness, the 5 poisons arise as the 5 wisdoms, and the 5 elements are in balance. By cutting through misconceptions about the 5 sense objects, you perceive clinging to the 5 bardos. Recognize sickness and suffering to have subsided. Turn the 5 negative forces into helpers, block the gates to the hells, and cross over the abyss of the 6 classes of beings. The third point is to establish original wakefulness as a non-duality through the great bliss of non-doing. So this is the non-dual state here. So Buddhas and sentient beings have no duality of time as before and after. Samsara and nirvana have no duality of identity as to good or evil. Appearance and emptiness have no duality in nature since they are indivisible. And they are therefore the great bliss of non-doing. There are 4 liberations from clinging. Unbiased personal experience liberates you from the clinging of denigrating the extreme of emptiness. The unchanging empty essence liberates you from the clinging to permanence of eternalism. Their indivisible unity liberates you from the clinging of altering truth and falsehood. And finally, their impartial ground liberates you from the clinging of abruptly falling into one-sidedness. So then he goes on into a list of 6-fold recognition. Recognizing appearances to be mind, mind to be empty, appearance and emptiness to be beyond duality, non-duality of great bliss to be non-thought, non-thought to be Dharmakaya. Then there's a meeting of the Dharmata mother through the 6-fold sealing. Giving appearances the seal of emptiness with appearances. Seal both with the non-duality of appearance and emptiness. Seal the non-duality with great bliss. Seal the great bliss with non-thought. Give non-thought the seal of unchanging dharmata. So he's going through sequences here. First we see one, we see the other, then we see the non-duality of those, and then through that process we reach the Dharmata or Dharmakaya, as the case may be. And then there's a list of the fivefold decision. Decide that Dharmakaya is primordially present, not something to seek or accomplish. Decide that pleasure and pain are Dharmakaya and therefore not something to accept or reject. Decide that Dharmakaya never ceases, it is beyond cause and effect. Decide that it is beyond the reference points of is and is not subject to exaggeration or denigration, and then decide that it is uncreated and continually present, not something to be produced by thought. And then there are the qualities of realizing the view. You resume the natural abode of wisdom and meet your Dharmata mother. Your conceptions naturally dissolve by recognizing the bliss of insightful action. You reach the natural perfection of knowledge. Your view is freed from limitations. So as we let go of this, it gradually just becomes bigger and bigger, less and less in terms of concepts and so forth that cause us to begin thinking and have emotional effects and so forth. Then you understand that there is no further enhancement, that the unity of the unity of appearance and emptiness. There's none other than yourself. This is none other than your own experience. You meet your Dharmata mother. Visual forms are experienced free of clinging, even though seen. Your conceptions naturally dissolve. Original wakefulness, Dharmata, and bliss are all found from within, and you comprehend the bliss of realized action. You begin to develop great confidence in this, recognizing your mind's nature as being Dharmata. So then Lady Togal asked, during the bardo of Samadhi, how does one clarify the unclear mind? And to this he replied, the yogi should look into his mind and train during the 3 times. So first, so he goes through each of these. So first, keeping your body straight. This is the posture. Assume the posture of equanimity. During daily activities, combine the following instruction with walking, moving about, lying down, and sitting. So you assume the posture and establish this equanimity as a part of that, but then you are able to have this meditative equipoise, if you will, as you go about doing all of these other things. Second, place your mind beyond something to be placed. Realizing the view, leave your senses unbridled. Recognize Dharmakaya, but remain without holding it to be Dharmakaya. Train for a long while, train uninterruptedly, train joyfully. And then to accept what this means, to acknowledge that there is bliss, wakefulness, thought-free awareness, and the play of wakefulness, while not holding that there is bliss, wakefulness, thought-free wakefulness, and the play of wakefulness. Okay, a little tricky there. Okay, but you experience them directly, you don't think about it, you don't conceptualize it, you don't analyze it in any way, and so forth. Thus, free of clinging, awareness that does not hold anything to exist naturally dawns. Okay, so that's the key part of that. Continuing on then on page 150, down in the second paragraph below the bullet points there. Your essence is not permanent, since it is stamped with emptiness. It is not nihilistic nothingness, since it is awake and unconfined. Once thoughts are utilized as wakefulness and suffering dawns as wisdom, there is no thing to be purified. Practice in this way. Train in prolonging this. Train delightedly. Tendencies to cling diminish, clarity, bliss, and feeling of having no body will occur. So then Lady Togal asked, during the bardo of dreaming, how does one connect habitual tendencies with samadhi? And so he replied, conduct. like an unceasing river mingling into your present state of samadhi with the mind of the time at the time of dreaming. And so he lists 3 points associated with this, and then talks about training in experiencing sleep as bliss and emptiness indivisible. Focus the awareness by dawning in it. So here talking about the heart or throat chakra, the it that it's talking about there. Focus the body by bending the 4 limbs. Focus both by never separating dreams from blissful emptiness. Never separate being asleep from meditation training. Okay, so being asleep is compared here to just dreaming, and so meditation, very, very similar to each other. When that is the case, you have mastered this bardo. On the next page, 152, the second paragraph, when there is tranquility without dreams, it is consciousness having dissolved into lucid wakefulness. You remain as serene, blissful emptiness as the non-arising state free of thinking. While practicing during the day, keep the notion of everything being dreamlike. When your training is developed to the point where there is no difference between dreams and waking, you will be able to cut through the bardo states. Uninterruptedly continue the training without break during daytime, dreams, and at all other times. A slightly different metaphor that I've used fairly successfully is like being in a play in the theater or something like that, where you're acting things out almost, but you seem separated from what's really going on. So you begin to develop this sensation of it being separate. There are cases where it talks about speech feeling like an echo, or something like that, or it's like somebody else is talking. It's not really you, because there's this kind of separation that occurs in the process of doing that. So all of those things can be helpful in the process of doing that. So it's very similar to the process of dreaming. It's like you're walking around in this dream during the daytime, kind of an experience. So then she asked, during the bardo of birth and death, how does one continue one's remaining karma? And so he replies on this, and mind essence neither takes birth nor dies. The mind essence never takes one or the other. When your breathing stops, remind yourself to support your attention. Concentrate both the body and mind so as to not be overtaken by circumstances. So-called death is your own thinking. Mind is not something from which you can ever part. Remind yourself of the meaning of your former view and meditation. So that's why the meditation, there's always a connection between our meditation practices and the bardo as a part of that. So we need to remind ourselves when we go through these particular bardos. Then she asks, during the bardo of becoming, this is the bardo that leads up to rebirth, what is the instruction in connecting with residual karma? And he replies, if you have trained in the deity of sacred mantra, you will appear in the form of the deity during the bardo and thereby attain the level of a Mahamudra knowledge holder. If you trained in Dharmata, you will recognize the thought-free state of being Dharmakaya and thereby attain Dharmakaya for yourself and others by manifesting as Sambhogakaya and Namanakaya to benefit beings. Okay, so you're attaining Buddhahood, you're capable of doing all three. So when you attain Dharmakaya, you also simultaneously achieve Sambhogakaya and Namanakaya. The bardo of becoming is similar to dreaming. When your breathing stops, your consciousness immediately arrives in the bardo. Your former tendencies make you think that you have a body, so that unless brought to an ultimate realization, you fall into the abyss of the 6 classes of beings. If you do interrupt the bardo, whether you bring a deity or dharmata to mind, you will blockade the cities of the 6 classes of beings. You will become whatever is brought to mind and thus disrupt samsara. Whenever the yogi's mind parts from his body, the very moment his mind separates from the body, he will attain Dharmakaya, known as awakening to Buddhahood in the bardo. The 5 disturbing emotions, dawn as the 5 wisdoms, the 84,000 Dharma doors are simultaneously manifest, and you act for the welfare of beings through Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya.